Hey there everyone. Today we're going to continue in our mastering of CSS selectors. Hope you'll join. Hey there everyone. Today we're going to continue with what we had touched on last week, which is specifically CSS selectors. Last week we touched on CSS selectors that pertain specifically to certain CSS events or events which within our websites that are activated through conditions like hovering, focusing, tabbing. Today we're primarily going to focus on selectors that give us more power as developers or people on the back end that lend us more power in controlling the elements on our page, that lend us more power on controlling large groups, selecting, deselecting, really mastering how you control everything on your web page with even less work and a smarter way to approach things. So let's go ahead and get started. For today's setup, I'm going to begin with a large div block with smaller div blocks within, and for the larger containing parent block, I'm going to be using a flex box in order to organize all of the elements within. This way things are automatically organized and we have a clear distinction of everything, every individual box within the box. This will help us visualize all the different selectors that we'll be using today. So to get started, let's quickly review what selectors we know so far. So far through this series, we've touched on the two standard types of selectors, which are either classes or IDs. These allow us to either select large groups through the use of classes, or they allow for us to select individual elements through the use of IDs. Past that, we've added the hover selectors, which are kind of like conditionals, and today we're going to go ahead and look at some more conditionals, as well as touching on how we can select specific elements and how we can select only the first or maybe even the last element in a collection. So in order to introduce our first new selector to the mix, what I'm going to do is actually add an individual ID to block 3 and block 4 in my code right now. So for block 3, I'll add an ID equal to B3. And then this is actually block 4, and then I'll do the same for block 3. So, like so, I switch it over, and to show you, usually when in previous lessons, what we would do is go ahead and color a selector within our CSS sheet through the use of a B3 tag, and then a B4 selector as well. And with this, we'll find that we spent a bit extra time in having to not only set up the syntax, but also set up the extra brackets for the second selector. But if we know we actually want both of them to be the same, for example, let's say we want our background color to be green, and we want this to be the case for both of our blocks. Instead of making two individual rules, what we can do is delete the second one, add a comma right after the B3, and then call our B4 selector. Like this, we only have to type one single line with both elements or with both IDs selected, and with that we're able to control the two individuals and kind of form a pseudo class, because even though they're two individual IDs, we're essentially creating a group that can be controlled individually, but with more specificity. To continue on, what we'll do is go ahead and look at what happens when we want to control the individual elements within these elements as well. So for our following selector, what we'll be doing is actually, instead of adding a new symbol or adding a symbol to our dictionary of selectors, is actually be messing with a lack of definition in this case. So our next selector will specifically focus on selecting a child element inside of a parent. What that means is we're essentially creating a scope. What we're doing is saying we want to choose a specific area and choose to only affect a specific type of element within that area. So to show you, I'm going to go ahead and call the class of small blocky, and then with a space, because we don't actually want to control the block itself, I'm going to add the element that I want to control. And as a setup, I've decided to turn block 3 into a paragraph tag instead of just having the plain text within the div. And I've also added an individual element, an h6 of still block 3, so that we can see it will only affect the scope that we select. So with a space, no comma, no period, nothing afterwards, we'll go ahead and add the P for paragraph tag. And you'll see that with this, we've specified that we want to control all the paragraph tags inside of all of these boxes and only affect the paragraph tags within. For the following selectors, I've made a couple of changes to my scene. What I've done is delete a couple of the blocks just so that we can look at what we're looking at in a more clear way. And I've also changed the last 2 blocks to just paragraph tags, because what we'll see is that here I'll actually be changing this to a div, and this will change all of our blocks into a green. Now let's say we want to specifically only have the paragraph tags that are inside of a div. We'll only have the paragraph tags that are parented by a div actually perform this action. So in this case, all of these will actually stay the same. But let's say we change this div to a nav, and in doing so, we'll find that these 2 aren't green anymore. And specifically, what we've done is we've given our CSS a rule set where unless the paragraph tag is inside of a div of any sorts, it won't, unless it has the parent that is this condition, the child element, in this case our paragraph tag, won't perform the condition. So really what we're doing here is forming a condition where the first element will only perform the child element within the first element will only perform the action if the condition is true. And what this could be useful for is, say we have a couple of blocks and we decided that this block is going to be a bit different from the others, and in order to differentiate it, what we'll do is add this condition to say we have different ice cream flavors and we want to feature one. In this case, if this was ice cream flavor, I don't know, let's just say Oreo flavored, we'd be able to single it out through a selector like this. Now, for our final selector, what we'll do is replace our greater than symbol, and in this case, we'll go ahead and replace it with a symbol that we use in math every day. And what we're going to do is add the addition button, and in doing so, what we actually want to do is also change our div to small blocky. And in doing so, what we'll find, if it works, let's go ahead and see what's wrong. What we should be finding is that all the elements placed immediately after small blocky should end up lighting up green. So the reason we don't see anything happening right now is because these are contained within. What we're looking to do is affect blocks that are immediately after something. So let's say we place this paragraph tag after this, but not after, actually let's specify even farther. Instead of small blocky 3, I'll do block 3, B3, and use the individual selector. So what we'll find is that with this plus selector, we'll specifically affect the element that is following the element we selected But if we placed the same element of a paragraph tag after block 4, that it also will not end up being green. This is because with the addition selector, what we'll find is that it specifically only affects the following element that is specified. So let's say we wanted to change it to div. In doing so, what would happen is nothing, because there isn't a div following it. So this selector is really great for specific use cases where you'll have a paragraph following a header, or a specific scenario where you always have an image followed by a paragraph tag. This is great for repeatable content because with this you can go ahead and set up something that would be conditional. So like, let's say you have a website where you upload images, and sometimes you can choose to add a description. With a selector like this, you can have a style set up just in case someone did add that description. So with that, we've touched on 4-5 selectors that allow for us to really define areas within our areas in an even more precise fashion. Next week, we'll touch on CSS animation and hopefully incorporate some of these selectors in creating websites that really create some wow or some really exciting experiences for our users. So until then, have a nice week.